Well, 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 that war in Ukraine is not going too well for the West. Boris Johnson has now lost his job. He's been forced to resign, purportedly because of some sex scandal regarding a subordinate. But we know that that is not the reason. The reason is that Britain is in a crisis. It's in utter chaos. Its economy is in free fall, largely because of the actions of one Boris Johnson, who has led the West on a happy crusade into Ukraine, which has ended in disaster. Much like the leaders of the Crusades way back when in Europe's history, Boris was on a righteous mission from God to go expel the godless Ruski, the heretic, from the land of Ukraine. Slava Ukraina, Boris exclaimed. Yet his rebel yell was not enough to scare off the fearsome Ruski, who's continued to march on, creeping ever further west into this vaunted land of Ukraine. Lo, the Slav has conquered all of Luhansk or Lugansk Oblast, whatever you prefer to pronounce. Not only Severodonetsk, but even Lysychansk has fallen to the terrible, gruesome Ruski raider. And what of Great Britain? Well, energy prices there have skyrocketed. The cost of living in the UK has skyrocketed in general, as costs of living are wont to do when you cut off a country's energy supply. Thanks to the Great Green Grift, nobody in the UK is interested in developing their own energy reserves, whether that be coal or trying to, introducing fracking as a practice, which I guess they've never done in England, or Scotland or Northern Ireland, any of Great Britain, which would be a way of them trying to procure their own natural gas so that it wouldn't have to be piped in from Russia. No, none of this was under consideration by Boris Johnson. The Boris Johnson plan was just to hold out forever, never surrender, and keep fighting for Ukraine until, I guess, the entire country of Great Britain, their entire society just collapses into the sea. He's taken an even more extreme stance than that of one U.S. President, Joseph Robinette Biden. I think it's safe to say that Boris could take the crown of most pro-Kiev Zelensky leader in the world. He's licked Zelensky's boots for months on end now, and it has gotten his country nowhere. In fact, as Boris has doubled down and tripled down on his support for Kiev, the situation in Ukraine has gotten worse and worse, and the situation in Britain, likewise, has gotten even worse. Now, once Boris is replaced, which will take some time, I guess he will be staying on, as a caretaker until there can be a leadership election within the Conservative Party of Great Britain. Whoever it is that takes over for him almost certainly will be worse than him. They all, within the Conservative Party, support this war in Ukraine. None of them want to compromise even a little bit from what I've seen. If anything, they'll argue that the reason why Britain is in such dire straits at the moment is because Boris wasn't pro-Ukraine enough. Either that, or they will ignore the issue altogether while continuing to pursue the same policy. Much like what we've seen with unpopular wars here in the United States, our elites just stop talking about them, but they continue to prosecute the wars in the shadows, even in secret, from sitting U.S. presidents such as Donald Trump, who ordered the troops out of Syria, and then eventually found out that, nobody listens to my orders. And so there will be no reconciliation with the Ruskies. In fact, Boris Johnson himself used to be seen as someone within Britain who was potentially willing to speak to the Ruskies. That's not to say that he was pro-Russia, but he was willing to talk to them in years past. There was an infamous meeting between him and some members of the intelligence community, and ever since that meeting, he has been staunchly anti-Russia and extremely hawkish. Heaven only knows what changed after that meeting, what he was told, what words were exchanged. But he chose his path. He's walked that path. He hasn't deviated from it one bit. And this is where it led him and his country. Yes, Boris did see the United Kingdom through Brexit. And I will give him some credit for that, because it is something that I think will never be undone. It is an important part of his legacy. It's something that Theresa May delayed and delayed. And he saw it through to the end. I won't say that he did it well, but at the end of the day, Britain is, when Boris Johnson came in to 10 Downing Street, Great Britain was in the European Union. And as he leaves it in the next couple of months, Britain is no longer in the European Union. Other than that, I can't say anything nice about the man. He's extraditing Julian Assange, who almost certainly will face the death penalty in the United States. He has blocked the Ukrainians from negotiating peace with the Russians, which would have limited the bloodshed in this war, a war which up to that point had already cost tens of thousands of lives. Even before the escalation in late February, there were, I think there were over 10,000 casualties in the Donbass, cumulatively from 2014 up to that point, and who knows how many tens of thousands on both sides have died since. There was an opportunity in Ankara early on when the Ruskies and the Ukrainians were meeting, and it seemed like the Ukrainians were willing to give in somewhat. And who knows, back then, if the Ukrainians had given in, if Boris hadn't told them to double and triple down, and to never surrender, and to be like Winston Churchill, maybe Ukraine would have only lost the Donbass, and of course they've lost Crimea way back in 2014. But no, at this point, Ukraine, thanks to the influence of Boris Johnson and whoever it is that's puppeteering him, the Ukraine will be reduced to a landmass which, under best case scenario at this point, would only extend as far east as the Dnieper River. All of the Trans-Dnieper at this point is going to be subsumed by Russia. That much is clear at this point. And the people of Ukraine can thank Boris for that largely. They also can thank him for, like I said, tens of thousands of deaths. Deaths of conscripts, young boys from that country who were thrown into a meat grinder, who had no choice. They were not allowed to leave. Some of them tried to smuggle themselves out, a few of them made it, but most of them, it seems, were thrown into boot camp with limited stocks of ammunition. Maybe they were given 1 or 2 full magazines when they were sent to the front line. And they were expected to just pick up ammunition off of dead Russian soldiers. And maybe that works when your side is killing more of the other side, but when you're the side that's taking more of the casualties, that doesn't work out so well. And so I think Boris Johnson should be remembered a lot like Tony Blair, as someone who maybe didn't directly cause the deaths of so many thousands of people as in the case of George W. Bush, but someone who enabled it. Because that's what Johnson has done. He sat on the sidelines, and he's been a cheerleader for all of this bloodshed. Even his own people, who his government encouraged to go over and sign up in these, in the now defunct Ukrainian Foreign Legion, those men were captured by the Russians. And the Russians, in violation of the Geneva Convention, I will admit, are prosecuting them as common criminals, as murderers. I don't think that's right, but the British government is doing nothing to help those men. They're not going over and talking to the Russians because I guess they think that's beneath them. Negotiate. Oh, we won't negotiate with the Russians. They're terrorists. We won't negotiate with terrorists. Okay, well, now the Ruskies are going to execute these young men who you encouraged to go over and fight in this war. And these are the lucky ones. These are the ones who managed to survive, who only got captured. You know, they haven't been maimed. Some of them I'm sure have, but, you know, the ones I'm talking about, they're perfectly healthy. But they're going to be tried by a Russian military tribunal and likely executed. But I'm sure the Ruskies would give in, you know, for a prisoner exchange. Maybe the British could offer up Assange. Not that I think the Ruskies want Assange, but, you know, I believe it was Alex Christoforou who pointed out, you know, that would just be a good troll for Putin to say he'll trade the lives of these British soldiers for Assange just to see the UK deny it and say, no, we would never let you have Assange. So it's very sad. You know, there are no good guys here. Obviously, I think the Ruskies do a lot of bad stuff. But I have no influence over the Ruskies. You know, they're the other side. They're the other team. I attack my team, and I want my team to be the good guys. I want them to be as good as possible. But they're nowhere close to being good guys. Our side is full of villains. That's who leads the Western world. And there's a lot of evil in the West that you don't find in the East. There are different kinds of things. Now, is it on net balance? Is the West still better than the East, in my opinion? Are we still freer? I think the United States, on net balance, we're still freer than, say, the Ruskies. But if you live in Western Europe, if you live in France, or certainly the Netherlands right now, I don't see Putin destroying family farms in Russia. That was something that Stalin did. Stalin's the one who went after the kulaks. It wasn't Putin. Mark Rutte is the one who's channeling Stalin. Boris Johnson is the one who encouraged the Ukrainians to take on an opponent that they could never defeat, that they never had a chance of defeating, in the form of Russia. Do I applaud the Russians taking advantage of the gullibility and the hubris of the Ukrainians? No, I don't applaud that. But I'm not going to shed much of a tear for the Ukrainian government at all. Especially considering that a lot of these areas that the Ruskies are now, you know, having to take by force, wanted to separate from Ukraine peacefully, and the Maidan government not only refused to consider such an idea, but they engaged in a vicious crackdown against anyone who would suggest such a thing. And so I do not have much sympathy for revanchist claims which will you know, prop up in the near future as soon as these areas, you know, are officially gone forever. You know, the Ukrainian nationalists will go about, you know, talk about how Odessa and Donbass and Kharkov were stolen from them. I won't cry for them because the Ukrainians were afraid of letting the people in those areas vote before if they wanted to be a part of Ukraine or not. So farewell, Boris Johnson. You won't be missed, but I shudder to think how terrible your replacement will be. You know, I could hope that maybe it'd be someone who is good on some issues like Jacob Rees-Mogg, although I'm sure Rees-Mogg is probably terrible on the Ukraine thing. But on domestic stuff in the UK, Rees-Mogg would unquestionably be far more sane than Johnson and his ilk. But you know, even he, who again is far from perfect, is a fringe figure from what I understand within the modern Conservative Party. I mean, from what I understand, Rees-Mogg is basically a Thatcherite. You know, he's not exactly some super based, you know, radical. You know, I mean, he hates Farage's guts, from what I understand. And Farage is someone who, you know, as an American, Americans tend to love Farage. But also is kind of indicative of his lack of mass popularity in the UK. I can hope that maybe at some point the British people will be fed up enough with the Tories and the Labour Party and the Lib Dems and all them to put Farage in power, but we're not there yet. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.